All right, so for our next card, we're going to use some foiling with a stamp. Now there's a slightly different process to this as with using it with a stencil. We're going to use the same transfer gel paste, but what we're going to do is I have a piece of fun foam here. It's on a piece of foam core just to give it a little bit of stability when I'm holding it. And I'm going to put a nice thin layer as if creating my own stamp pad, and then I'm going to stamp the image and then stamp it to my cardstock. Now I do keep my piece of foam in a plastic bag to give it a little bit of life so that it doesn't dry out on there. And I'm going to show you stamping on a black card. We already see how it's going to look on the sample here, but then we're going to do it on a piece of white, just to show you what the difference looks like. So very first step is taking some of the transfer gel, and we're going to put a nice thin layer on our piece of fun foam, trying to get it as thin as possible and as even as possible. And the palette knife makes it nice and easy because there's a nice straight edge there. So it's almost like putting icing onto the piece of foam there. I'm going to take my stamp, and I am tapping it a couple times just to make sure that I get it all over the place. And then I take a look. The gel is white, so I can see exactly where it is. I'm going to stamp it on my cardstock. You want to make sure when you're stamping it that you are very careful not to let it slip, because it is a little bit slick and it would be very easy to slide on your cardstock. So that needs to dry till it's completely clear, just like the paste and the stencil. And once again, it's much easier to see on the black than on the white. Now I'm going to stamp a sentiment, and once again I'm being very careful to try not to have it slide on my cardstock. And then I need to let that dry. So I'm going to pause a minute. I'm going to clean all my supplies and put this away, and then I will be back. I have my white one here that's completely dried. For the stamping, you don't need to wait quite as long as the paste. The paste, I want to say you probably have to wait a couple hours till it's completely dry because it's quite a bit thicker. With the stamping, it's not nearly as thick, so you don't have to wait quite as long, but you still want to make sure that it's completely dry. You'll be able to see exactly where the stamped image is because it'll be kind of glossy, but it'll be completely clear. So I'll see you in just a moment. All right, so my area and my paste is all cleaned up. We are ready to foil. So I've got my piece here that has the dried foiling gel on here. Now my piece of foil here, I'm using a piece of holographic foil, is not quite big enough to cover the butterfly plus the sentiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to put my sentiment piece down, and then I'm going to put my piece over my butterfly. Now, as I said before, this gel can be used with either pressure or with heat. So as I've said, I'm using a die cutting machine. I'm using a Bigshot to apply pressure. If you didn't have one, you could also use an inexpensive laminator. That would work with this gel as well. All right. So now we can lift this up. And I see there's a few spots that are missing, so I'm just going to turn this over a little bit. And then I'm going to add an extra piece of cardstock underneath just to tighten the pressure a little bit and see if that helps. And I'll put it through right again. 1 second. So this is a great way to foil without a foiling machine, but your results are going to be slightly different. It's going to have a slightly different look to it. That's to be expected, but it's still, see, that helped a lot. It's still a nice inexpensive way to be able to get foiling on there. Now let's move this stuff out of the way here. And I've got a tiny little bit of foil on here. The way to fix that is to use an adhesive eraser. And you can just erase and it'll remove those areas. Now we can glue this to the back of our card here. Now for this one, I didn't use anything to frame it as I did the first one. In the next card, I'm going to show you a way to frame it that is actually a little bit easier, plus a little bit more precise. It just frames it a little bit nicer than the method that I showed you in the first video. Now this mat doesn't really show up on the back of the card or from the card, so probably what I should have done was picked a different color for the card base, just to kind of bring out the colors in the holographic foil there, because this didn't really do it as much as I would have liked. But still, actually I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab another piece of cardstock. I'll be back in a moment and we'll fix it. All right, so I've grabbed a pale pink cardstock, and it's just going to let the color of the holographic foil shine through a little bit better. It's going to frame this a little bit better. Yeah. Definitely a nicer look than just putting it on plain white. And there you go. So it's very simple to use stamps. Now here's the one thing that I wanted to say. I chose a stamp that had some detail but wasn't super detailed. In that set there's another butterfly here that's really detailed and has a lot of lines in it. That particular stamp didn't foil nearly as well as this one did. So you're going to have to pick and choose which stamps you use. Here's another one that is just, it's got finer lines to it. And once again, that one didn't foil quite as nicely as I would have liked. So you will have to play around with stamps that work better than others. So be aware of that. But it's a great way to get some extra use out of your stamps in a different way, as well as the fact that you don't have to buy a foiling machine in order to do this. I see a little bit of a line here from some foil, so I'm just getting rid of that there. But there we go. The same color foil, two different backgrounds, and it just shows you the difference between the two. Neither one is right or wrong. Both are personal preference, but they still look absolutely beautiful. And obviously this sentiment could be swapped for any one that you have. Same as the image. I'm sharing with you on our supply list all the ones that I am using for this class, but you could easily change stencils, you could change images, you could change foil colors and customize it to your own preference. We'll see in the next video. We're going to take stamping and foiling, and we're just going to tweak it just a little bit, add a few more extra elements to it.